You're here because you're curious, you want to cut through the noise, and get right to the heart of what matters.
Yeah.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into this document someone shared, just called pasted text. And it explores this really mind-bending idea.
Right. The idea that maybe there are unseen forces subtly guiding human history.
Exactly. Could something like that actually be happening?
It's a big question. This narrative, it really leans into it, asks us if, our view of reality is maybe incomplete.
That there might be influences just sort of beyond our perception, nudging things.
Gently nudging world events. Yeah, that's the core idea.
And we're not talking about, like, standard conspiracy theories here. The source gets into some pretty fascinating, though definitely speculative stuff.
Oh, yeah. Things like a politician giving a speech that sounds weirdly prophetic.
Uh-huh. Or revolutionary tech just popping up seemingly out of nowhere.
And then it ties in these really advanced scientific concepts, multidimensional physics.
Quantum entanglement. That spooky connection stuff.
Exactly. So our mission today, for everyone listening, is to really unpack this central concept from the text, these watchers of the fourth dimension.
Okay.
We want to explore how this narrative imagines them and, their supposed influence, especially with this year 2047 mentioned as some kind of pivotal time.
Right, 2047. So let's dig into that core idea first, watchers of the fourth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
The text basically says these are beings existing outside our normal 3D plus time reality.
That's the premise, living in or interacting with a fourth spatial dimension. And the idea is they might be subtly, guiding things as humanity heads toward this transformation around 2047.
It really does stretch the brain, that concept.
It does. And the narrative doesn't paint it as like direct control, more like a delicate touch, almost invisible.
Yeah, subtle manipulation.
And what's interesting is how it sets this up. It starts small with things that just seem like weird coincidences.
Right, the text calls them peculiar coincidences. Like
Yeah.
that politician example suddenly giving this incredibly insightful speech, almost predicting things.
Or the inventor, unveiling tech that no one saw coming.
And then there are these unusual natural disasters happening in weird places.
On their own, you'd probably just dismiss them, right? Just the world being unpredictable.
Totally. Random chance.
But the narrative suggests, no, maybe these weren't just random. Over time, these isolated incidents started forming a pattern.
A pattern.
Yeah, one that seemed to defy normal probability. It hinted at something more going on, something not quite fitting our usual understanding of cause and effect.
Okay, so that's where the idea of some kind of non-human influence starts creeping in.
Exactly. Which leads us right to Dr. Evelyn Kline.
Dr. Kline, the text mentions she's a researcher in multidimensional physics at the Global Institute of Physics.
That's her. She's the one, according to this narrative, who starts connecting the dots.
So what was her work initially, before this disturbing turn the text mentions?
Well, she was already way out there on the theoretical edge, exploring the possibility of dimensions beyond the ones we experience.
Like string theory and that kind of thing.
Sort of related, yeah. The idea that there might be more dimensions isn't totally out of left field in physics. She was working on the math, the potential implications.
Okay.
The disturbing turn happened when her theoretical models started suggesting that maybe there wasn't just space out there, but something active, something aware.
Aware in these higher dimensions.
That's the leap the narrative takes. It wasn't just abstract math anymore. She apparently started seeing things in her actual experiments.
Ah, the strange readings. On her quantum sensors, it said.
Exactly. These fluctuations that she couldn't explain, they hinted at deliberate manipulation of space-time itself.
Deliberate manipulation of space-time. For anyone not deep into physics, that sounds, well, pretty wild.
It absolutely sounds like sci-fi, but the narrative presents it as this, shocking scientific discovery.
Right.
And it stresses these weren't just instrument errors or background static. Dr. Kline supposedly found specific patterns.
Patterns in what?
In how quantum entangled particles behaved. Those particles linked across distance. Instant connection.
Yeah, the spooky action at a distance.
Right. Her sensors were picking up anomalies there and in other subatomic interactions. And crucially, these patterns seemed structured, purposeful, not random, like someone was messing with the quantum foam.
Wow. Okay. And the implication of that is huge and kind of scary.
Definitely unsettling, because if there are beings who can interact from the fourth dimension, they could potentially tweak reality, influence history without leaving any obvious fingerprints we'd never even know.
Which brings up the massive question, why? If they could do that, what's the motive? That's the puzzle Dr. Kline faces, according to the text.
Exactly. What's the end game? The narrative throws that question out there, this big mystery driving Kline's work.
Okay, so then the story shifts gears. It presents what it calls the first undeniable sign.
Ah, yes, the debate.
The televised debate. President Davenport from the U.S., Chancellor Richter from the EU, talking climate change. Pretty standard stuff, you'd think.
Until it wasn't.
What happened? What was so weird about it?
Well, according to the text, President Davenport is mid-sentence talking about, I don't know, renewable energy credits or something.
Right.
And he just stops, pauses, and then launches into this totally different speech. Really passionate, off the cuff, about global unity, humanity's shared destiny, stuff completely unrelated to the policy point.
Whoa, just out of the blue.
Completely. And apparently seemed incredibly genuine, but totally unexpected.
And Richter did something similar.
Yeah. She was supposed to be talking diplomatic strategies, carbon targets. Instead, she gives this equally fervent plea for global cooperation, even hints at needing some kind of world government focused on planetary survival.
So that doesn't sound like typical political maneuvering.
Not at all. The text emphasizes how bizarre it was. These two leaders, often with different agendas, suddenly sounding exactly the same, pushing for this grand, unified vision with zero warning.
The media must have gone nuts.
Oh, absolutely. Speculation everywhere. But the narrative focuses on Dr. Kline's reaction.
What was her take?
She saw it as confirmation. Not just a weird political moment, but evidence. Evidence of that subtle influence she suspected acting on their minds.
An outside force that understood politics. Timing.
Exactly. Like it knew precisely when and how to inject that specific message for maximum impact.
So for Kline, this debate wasn't just odd, it was the proof. The first undeniable sign that the Watchers were real and active.
That's how the narrative frames it. A huge turning point for her.
So what does she do next? After this proof?
Well, now she's convinced, right? So she dives back into her research, but with this new conviction, she starts digging through all her past quantum data, specifically looking for links.
Links between the weird sensor readings and real-world stuff.
Exactly. Trying to correlate those quantum disturbances with major historical events. And this is where the text gives more concrete examples of the alleged influence.
Okay, like what?
The first one mentioned is the Amazon wildfires back in 2029. Huge disaster.
I remember reading about those, yeah. Devastating.
And the text points out that afterwards, this really comprehensive global treaty on climate change, deforestation, pollution, it just sort of happened really quickly.
Despite years of countries arguing and getting nowhere on those exact issues.
Precisely. Years of deadlock, then suddenly, bam, a treaty.
So how does Kline connect that to the Watchers?
Her analysis, again, according to the narrative, showed these significant quantum blips coinciding with key moments in the treaty negotiations.
Like right when decisions were being made.
Yeah, points where leaders who'd been really resistant suddenly changed their minds, made unexpected concessions, shifted their stance just enough to let the whole thing go through.
Suggesting it wasn't just politics as usual.
The implication is clear. It was an unseen nudge, pushing things towards that specific, arguably beneficial outcome.
Okay, that's one example. What else?
The other big one is the 2035 global financial crisis.
Ah, another rough patch.
Yeah. And the text describes how central banks globally took these really coordinated, kind of unprecedented actions to stabilize everything. Actions that didn't perfectly align with standard economic theory at the time.
And it worked. Better than expected.
That's the suggestion. And again, Dr. Kline supposedly links this back to the Watchers.
How? Same kind of pattern.
Similar idea. The recovery was almost too neat, too synchronized. Kline's data apparently showed that fourth-dimensional interference again, cropping up during critical decision-making moments within those financial institutions.
So not telling them exactly what buttons to push, but influencing their thinking. Guiding them.
Towards actions that would stave off total collapse. That's the narrative's interpretation. It was guided, not just lucky.
So the scope of this alleged influence seemed to be growing across these examples, and interestingly, the results seem positive. Avoiding disaster, getting cooperation.
That's a key point the narrative makes. The outcomes appear beneficial for humanity overall, but then things get really personal for Dr. Kline.
Right, the encounter in her lab. Late at night.
Yes. This is a major shift. It goes from observing effects out there in the world to a direct personal contact.
What does the text say happened?
It describes this really atmospheric scene. She's alone, working late. Suddenly the air feels thick, heavy, and she hears or rather perceives, this low humming sound, but like inside her head.
A mental hum. Weird.
Simultaneously, her quantum sensors go off the charts, a massive, unprecedented spike.
And that's when she hears the voice.
Yes. A voice speaking directly into her thoughts, no sound waves involved.
Chilling. And it identifies itself.
As the Watchers.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Okay. Wow. So what do they tell her? What's the message?
Well, they basically confirm her theories, according to the text. They say, yes, we exist in the fourth dimension. Yes, we've been watching humanity for millennia.
Millennia?
Yeah. And they claim their interventions, these subtle nudges throughout history, they've all been part of a long-term plan to guide humanity towards a higher purpose.
Higher purpose. What do they mean by that?
Yeah.
And why do it so subtly? Why not just show up?
Good question. Their explanation in this telepathic info dump to Kline is that they're trying to help us evolve, to help humanity transcend our current limitations, reach our potential.
Evolve. How?
They claim these nudged events, the speeches, the tech leaps, the global agreements, they're all like stepping stones on an evolutionary path.
Okay.
And the narrative suggests they told her humanity is right on the edge, the cusp, of a major transformation. An awakening.
An awakening to what?
To understanding the universe the way they do, in its true multidimensional nature.
So they're not trying to conquer us or trick us, it sounds like.
Not according to this account. The text emphasizes their claim that they aren't actually revealing anything new. They're just allowing Kline, and maybe through her, humanity, to finally see the reality that's always been there, just beyond our senses.
And there's this urgency, like this evolution is happening now.
Yes, a strong sense of imminence. And they present Kline with a choice.
What choice?
Basically, accept your place in this bigger cosmic picture, accept this guidance, and evolve with it. Or resist it.
Resist evolution.
The implication is that this change is coming whether we like it or not. It's our destiny, maybe. The choice is just whether we go willingly or fight it.
And then they just leave.
The voice fades, leaves her there in the lab, completely stunned, alone with this revelation.
That is
a
lot to process. So what happens after that? How does she deal with knowing this?
Well, the narrative describes her grappling with it, realizing the Watchers aren't just passively observing anymore. They're actively shaping the future, steering us down this path.
A path that seems good so far, but still unknown.
Exactly. Yeah, and she faces this huge dilemma. Tell the world, risk mass panic, disbelief, or keep this secret.
What does she decide?
Ultimately, she looks at the evidence, the positive outcomes, the advancements, the lack of obvious malice, and concludes they probably aren't hostile.
So she chooses not to fight it.
Right. She decides her role isn't to resist, but to try and understand, maybe even to help guide humanity through whatever this next phase is.
A kind of bridge between humanity and the Watchers.
Perhaps. The narrative ends by highlighting that shift, from the Watchers just observing us to this potential future where humanity might actually join them.
Join them in understanding this bigger reality.
Yeah. It wraps up by connecting all those threads, the multidimensional physics, the seeming destiny unfolding, the cosmic mysteries revealed through Kline's journey.
It's definitely a compelling story pulling all that together.
It really is. Leaves you thinking.
For sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the ideas in that pasted text, you're kind of left thinking, what if? What if there were forces like that, subtly shaping things? What would that even mean for us?
Yeah, what are the implications? And maybe the kicker is, if we were being gently guided, would we even notice? Could we tell the difference between guidance and just history unfolding?
And what would the ultimate goal be? Where would that guidance be taking us?
Makes you wonder about that line, doesn't it? Between coincidence, just how things happen naturally, and maybe something else influencing the big picture of history.
A lot to chew on there. Thanks for diving deep with us on this one.